Greetings, gamers, and welcome to episode 7 of Rested XP. It's a podcast about online gamers and their community, mental health, relationships, all the stuff. I am Brad Archer. You may also know me as Sharku online. And it is 2:18 p.m. Eastern Time on October the 11th, 2020. We're going to jump into some discussion today about LGBTQ gamers and their experience and different experiences in games with LGBTQ. It's so hard for me to say that. I'm the worst person in the world, but
it's the alphabet soup, right?
It really is. We also have, I was reminded by our wonderful guest host, Matt Dimick, the Reverend Matt Dimick, who is here with us today. He's a friend of mine from college, and we kept up, and I know he's both gay and plays video games, so I'm like, you need to be on my show. But I was reminded it is National Coming Out Day, so happy National Coming Out Day to everyone. If you are ready to come out, today's a good day to do it. So
I feel like for a moment you were trying to figure out what is the National Coming Out Day like holiday greeting.
Right.
Merry coming National Out Day.
Merry coming out.
Yes.
But I've already introduced Matt. He's my buddy. He's going to be hanging out with us. How you doing today, Matt?
I'm doing great. My husband is on a guy's weekend with his friends, and I've got the place to myself, so it's good. Yeah.
So we're going to sit around and talk about video games and then play Among Us later, right?
I've never played Among Us.
Oh
I've watched it. I've never played it.
It's $5 and you need to get it. Everybody out there.
I believe that. I've watched it, and but
it's just such silly fun. A lot more fun to play with friends than with online randos, though. But
I figured that much, yeah.
But there you go. Also joining me, as always, the true villain, Manny, all the way up from Canada, where it is Canadian Thanksgiving, holidays galore. Neither of them I was aware of before I started recording the podcast today.
The equal holiday of National Coming Out Day, Canadian Thanksgiving.
Right. How are you doing, Manny?
Yes. So, happy Thanksgiving. And I honestly do think that happy is the right term for Coming Out Day as well. So we'll say happy Coming Out Day as well to everybody who is proud of who they are or just discovering who they are in equal measure. So I'm really happy to be talking about this. Honestly, when you had scheduled this for this day, I was just like, man, that guy is so forward thinking, and you pulled a fast one on me. But I'm glad to be talking about this today.
Just divine intervention.
Your Outlook calendar is really on point with holidays.
I know.
It was meant to be.
We were going to have Matt like a month ago, and then we're like, oh no, because also, if you have not noticed, our normal co-host Tour Arts is not here because it is also her birthday weekend. I don't know if it's actually her birthday today, but she could not join us because she's off partying. So, like I said,
her birthday was earlier. Yeah,
it was earlier. But yep, she's having a fun time. She turns 23 this year, I think. So
she's been 23 for a couple of times. She's re-celebrating turning 23.
Yeah, I'm trying to be clever. I don't know, but anyway, best wishes to True Arts. I can't wait to have you back next time we do the show. Let's jump into it. This is normally. Well, let me give a couple quick announcements, and we have the same announcements this week as we have pretty much every week. This is a new show. We've been going for a couple months now, but we're trying to grow our community. So make sure you check out our Twitter at RestedXPcast, see what's going on. On that Twitter, there's also a link to join our Discord. So make sure you click that link, join our Discord, have conversations about what we're talking about on the show with a bunch of other folks. It's a nice support group as well if you've got stuff going on. We're all about mental health and talking about relevant conversations, and if that's something you're into, you should definitely check our Discord out. You can find that again at RestedXP on Twitter, at RestedXPcast on Twitter. So that's that. We also have icebreakers, and I didn't plan one today because, as you guys can tell, I'm batting 1,000 right now at being awesome. But Matt came up with one. So our guest host, the Reverend Matt Dimick, is going to to break the ice.
Yeah. So I get to teach a lot of medical students in my work. And so I'm coming up with icebreakers all the time. And this is one I used this week that worked pretty well. But what is the strangest thing you ate as a child? Like something you loved? And I will give you
Oh my God.
my example. We used to go to Golden Corral. I don't know if y'all remember such a place. And as a kid, it was great. You got to grab whatever you wanted to eat. And I used to make a special soup by putting the shredded carrots in a bowl and filling it with ranch dressing. And then I would eat that.
Carrot ranch soup.
Yep, carrot ranch dressing soup. I do not know why my parents did not stop me. But that was one of the weird things I ate as a kid. I do not eat that anymore. But curious, do you guys have any? Oh yeah, I guess I could like actually introduce myself, right? Matthew, I am a reverend.
Yeah.
I work as a chaplain at a children's hospital, and I love gay. I am gay. I love gay. I am gay. I love gay.
I love gay.
I was gonna say I love gay gaming, but I love gaming, and I love gaming with my queer friends, and I am excited to be here. So that is my introduction and my icebreaker.
Awesome. The ranch soup got me. And I honestly think the only Golden Corral I've ever been to is the one in Shelby, which is the town that was near the college that me and Matt went to. It was not.
The world
it
is
was
the Golden
not a great.
Corral.
Golden Corral is it's a buffet.
It's a buffet dining place. Yeah.
So they've got, and it's like a smorgasbord. They've
Yeah.
got they've got pizza, they've got prime rib, they've got a salad bar, and they've got like taco stuff. It's,
To be clear, we are not being sponsored right now by Golden Corral.
no, and I'm not.
Frasley's in
wanna
chat
vouch for
saying
them.
that it's not good, but it's cheap.
It's crap, but it's cheap, and that's
It's everything you can imagine, but tastes slightly less good than you'd hope.
yeah.
Okay, so that's like the Olive Grove in Canada,
Maybe.
and I
I'm
don't want
guessing.
to I don't want people to confuse that with the Olive Garden, which is like actually a thing. This is like some knockoff version that was just like, man, I kind of wish you guys knew what salt was or any kind of seasoning.
Oh my gosh.
This is another similar, like a Ryan Steakhouse or a Sizzler would be kind of
Yeah, more or
similar to what this is, if you guys. But yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if Ryan. I think there's still a Ryan's in Asheville where I live. But anyway, so Manny, what's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten?
Oh,
You
man.
ate as a kid.
I can't think of any ones like that. I mean, like,
That was
there's
pretty
like
bizarre.
strange ethnic food that I'm just sort of like, if somebody introduced me to that today, I'd just be like, nah, I'm not having that. So like pig's foot,
Pig's
was-
foot, yeah.
right? Yeah. Oxtail.
That's a southern delicacy down here, pickled pig's feet.
Oh yeah, no. If somebody introduced that to me today, I'd just be like, I'm gonna try one and like cut off the smallest piece and be like, all right, sure.
That is such a Canadian answer too. I'm going to be very polite and accept your offer.
Yes, I will. I
love
will
that.
eat whatever you offer me because I don't want to be rude. I don't know what the weirdest thing I ever ate as a child. I was a really picky eater. But what comes to mind is when I was in high school, I went on a mission trip to Peru. And in Peru, there's a delicacy called cuy, which is guinea pig.
Mm.
And I ate guinea pig in Peru. I also ate alpaca steak. But that's, yeah.
That sounds good.
It was delicious.
I don't know about the guinea pig though.
Both of them.
Do we eat?
The guinea? It tasted a lot like cat.
Do we have? Well,
You've had cat?
not a reference point many of us.
That was always my joke, though, when everybody's like, "What it taste like?" I'm like, "It tasted like cat."
Do we have socially acceptable rodents we eat in America?
And parts of
Mice,
America, I
squirrel.
believe, like raccoon and possum, is something.
Yeah,
Say
that's true.
That will be like the south,
Like
the southeast.
weasel?
Yeah. I don't know.
Um,
All right. That's what I got.
But yeah, I don't know of anything weird that I ate as a kid. Fluffernutter sandwiches were something that peanut butter fluff or peanut butter and marshmallow
The marshmallow fluff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
Weird topping.
no.
they're
That
coming for you,
marshmallow
Matt.
fluff. Ugh.
Oh yeah, you hear it?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I live in Upper Manhattan. I live in East Harlem and Upper Manhattan. That's a really nice way of putting East Harlem. But we
The
get
Upper
a
East
lot of
Side.
ambulances with the Upper East Side. And actually, with COVID, we've actually heard a lot more of them. My husband works here during the day, and he says you can tell when we're getting,
crazy.
So, womp womp.
Alrighty. Well, yep. That's that's just the sound of New York. Womp womp.
The sound of death.
Oh.
Womp womp.
So now the icebreaker's out of the
well,
way.
that's going to be our opener.
We're gonna jump
transition.
Let's jump into some
Did
discussion.
I mention I have the most depressing job in the history of humankind?
So talk to us a little bit about your job to start with, because you mentioned that you're a reverend. You were recently ordained a few months ago.
Yeah.
And ever since I've known you, like, you were a religion studies major in college, and you were always into that stuff. But what do you do for a living?
You're always into that stuff.
That stuff.
Yeah,
that God
I was
stuff.
into that stuff. So yeah, I for a living I work as a spiritual care provider in a hospital at NYU, and I mostly work with children and their families. And so being in the hospital is, of course, for a lot of people, a very scary place. It's a place where we often intersect how we make sense and meaning. And so as an interfaith chaplain, I approach people with sensitivity to that trauma, to that the place where they're trying to make sense of their emotions and what's going on and how they feel, and provide support. And as a ordained minister, sometimes that means prayer, and sometimes that means baptisms and ritual. But a lot of times it's just listening, talking. The things chaplains are most trained in, that we get an additional training over just being clergy, is about listening, being sensitive to the medical needs and the psychosocial needs of the people we care for. And I love it. I have great patience, and my coworkers are incredible. So, and it means I've been working through the entire COVID process. So I've been reporting to work, been biking there.
Well, and that particularly, I mean, New York got hit really hard at the beginning. So I can't imagine the difficulty in. I'm, as a lot of listeners know, I'm in a program right now to become a therapist. So I understand a lot of the. I'm learning now about a lot of the difficulty, and yes, I have my job to kind of help people through these difficult times, but the emotional toll it takes on yourself if you're not taking care of yourself, and all of the emotion stuff, and you still have to be there for other folks. It's super, super tough. But as an interfaith minister, you're serving people of all different faiths or lack thereof.
Yep, exactly. And I have, some of my patients are Hasidic or they're Orthodox Jewish patients, and they know that I'm Christian, and we have very open conversations about their faith and what's going on with them. And it's an incredible place to do. If you want to talk religion and theology, I can't think of a better place than a hospital setting with people who are trying to make sense of what's going on. And I love it. It's great.
That's really cool. It's like a lot of work, because I think that, especially in the religious community and in just faith groups in general, something that can really help a lot of the issues that we've got going on in the world right now, and especially in our country, is having conversations and learning about people and realizing we're really not that different. And that's really, really cool.
Yeah, that's cool. That's great.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit then about gaming, and I'll let Manny jump in here with a question or two in a second if he's got one. So I know that you're into Warcraft. We've talked about that before, and you've played games. I'm pretty sure, I don't remember if you were part of my I was a residence life advisor, a residential advisor in college, and we had video game tournaments. Did you ever come into our video game tournaments on L3? I don't remember.
I don't know. I lived on L3. Was that your first? I lived on that unit for a while, but I took a break from a lot of gaming in college because of how easily it is for me not to do college. when
Yeah,
I could
I almost Oblivion. I almost failed out. I don't know if you remember that or not.
Okay.
Oblivion came out.
I was a TA for one of the professors whose classes you were taking, and I remember how you were doing.
Was that Dr. Qualls?
Dr. Qualls, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My excuse was I got mono. So
I
I got
thought
mono.
it was
That game came
a
out, and then I'm
breakup,
like,
but I'll
screw
go with the
school.
mono thing.
Oh,
yeah.
the breakup was earlier. Yeah, I was a bad student. But
Brad's
yeah,
history is marred by periods of breakups, and you can kind of see where things are going in that case. So.
yeah, that's true.
No, but yeah, no, yes, but I like World of Warcraft. I love the lore of World of Warcraft, but I don't like the chores that come with World of Warcraft. So I read a lot I follow like Taliesin and some of the people who cover some of the lore and the
me and Taliesin are personal friends. Did I tell you that?
Really?
I've had him on the show before. I sat next to him at BlizzCon once.
Oh, he's great. I watched his
He's
show
super
on
cool.
World of Warcraft. It keeps me up, and congratulations to him. I think he got married in like the last 2 years.
Yeah, him and Evitel, they have a kid now.
Oh, really? I
They
didn't
have
know that.
they have
Wow.
yeah, they had a baby a couple 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah, and it's weird because I just don't play Warcraft consistently. I usually jump in at the beginning of a. I'm exactly what. Well, I'm sure they'd rather me stick around and pay the subscription, but I buy the new one every time, and then I play it for like 2 months, and then I stop.
And then you're like done. Yeah.
It's like easier to just read the like WoW head and figure out what's going on. So.
Mm-hmm. Understandable. Manny, you got any questions? Or just
I'd love to get a little more of your background history in like gaming. Like, so when you're in between expansions and WoW, like what else do you like play? Like, what's your forte?
Let me tell you what I'm playing these days. So as much as like I'm sure I'm like one of very few people who I still play Heroes of the Storm constantly.
My man.
I felt like by the time I got into League of Legends, I was like, there's too much here. There's too much to learn. But I was able to get on the alpha on like Heroes of the Storm, and I like the Blizzard lore, so I play that. I play that with a friend of mine in California pretty consistently. Currently, I'm working my way through Final Fantasy VII, the remake, and I am obsessed with Hades right now on the Switch. If you haven't played that,
oh, I don't know that game.
It's amazing. It is like they took all the elements that we consider to make something gaming, like story, narrative, and like the sort of triggers in your mind that make you feel good for accomplishing things. They put it into a Rogue Runner, and then they just amped it all up by 10. It's great. It's a really well done game. You should give it a try. But it's technically a dungeon runner. And you know how mostly in dungeon runners you hate the point where like you have to restart the dungeon. That's the best part. Going back to the beginning and like talking to all the characters and like cashing in on all the stuff you found. They really like, it's amazing. It's a little queer too.
It's pretty awesome because like you are like the son of Hades and you're trying to escape the underworld. And so like each time you die, that's you resetting back to like the initial starting point. And you can just pick builds, like you can have the gun build or the fist build or sword build and go through it. It's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, and the relationships between the characters are done. They clearly did their research on like the Greek mythology and like lovingly kind of molded it a little bit. There's a really good article about how the Greek gods represent a lot of different races and identities. And they're like, look, if they're gods of all people, so we can kind of play with that in the way they're depicted. And it's really fun. You should try it.
Interesting. Yeah, I love, especially when you get like a smart game where it's not just like, that's something I didn't really love about God of War, for example. It seemed like they just sort of took these like base understandings of Greek gods and stuff, and it's like, Ares is the god of war, so we're just gonna. But there wasn't a lot of mythological foundation
I feel like
behind it. You know, it was just sort of like
they're doing a little bit more of that in the newest one that they did. Like they were like, all right, let's try to be a little bit more
flesh
nuanced.
This out a little bit more.
Yeah, because it's a missed opportunity when you kind of introduce a character just as somebody to murder. So
Hercules is just like, I'm a guy with armor.
That's who I thought. It was like Hercules was like so underdeveloped, but you get to beat him up and it's great.
Yeah.
And it's Hercules, and I killed Hercules. Yay!
So
Awesome.
Yeah, I've been playing those. I have a habit of buying games. Like I buy books and I like put them on a shelf, and then I'm like, I'll get around to this. And there's I'm looking at my stack over there, and we got a few more to play.
So
Yeah.
my next question would be like, what was like the first game that you fell in love with?
Oh, the first game I fell in love with was probably Super Mario RPG.
Wow.
What was that? Legend of the
Shooting Star or
Seven
Stars?
Stars. I
Mm-hmm.
think.
I love that
I mean,
game.
I'm still like totally all about Gino being included in Super Smash Brothers, and they're like the Minecraft guy, and I'm like, yeah, that made sense, but I'd rather have Gino. Like, the one person out there who, I think that was a game I finished it, and I was like, I earned this ending. I earned the relationship with all these characters. Like, I replayed it as a kid, which wasn't something I did a lot. I found all the secret, like the giant shell that you can kick. I really loved that game. Yeah, that was a game I fell in love with pretty early on.
A surprisingly underrated game. I feel like not a lot of people played it.
Yeah,
Is it underrated? I love that game so much. I just don't care what anybody says about
it.
Yeah.
It was in that it was right in the middle of the whole RPG craze. I think it came out around the same time as Final Fantasy VII.
The biggest issue with
it was seen as a knockoff, but it was really good.
It was it was one of the last games of that generation. It was one of the last Super Nintendo games. And
it was
pretty
also
quickly we moved into the next gen.
It introduced 3D, like the beginnings of 3D into video. And this was on the Super Nintendo 16-bit, but you were moving around in 3D.
Oh yeah, I was using that like I forget what they called the chip that they used in Star Fox to like really push things, but it was using that chip to like really go through.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it was so but then Final Fantasy VII comes out and just blows everybody away with the FMV and stuff. But
right, because then you're looking at the PlayStation, and
right,
but,
they had a lot more to work with. But yeah, it absolutely was a great game. If you haven't had it, it's got to be out there somewhere.
I would say the other game that I fell in love with that's super underrated is Rystar for Sega Genesis.
I've heard of that game. I've never played it.
Exactly. And
it was fairly
I would
popular,
replay that game all the time. So I think I miss the days where we used to replay the games we loved so much. Nowadays, it would take a lot of energy to replay like most of the games.
I'm on replay like 37 of Final Fantasy VII in my life, so
that's impressive.
I still will do that. If I get bored, I'm like, let's just do it. But yeah, no, I feel you. Go ahead, Manny.
So, on the other side of what we're talking about, when did you come out initially?
I knew you were
sort of talked about that. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit in the pre-show.
That was going to be my icebreaker because it was National Coming Out Day.
I mean,
but you're the only one that could have answered it. Yeah,
it's a great icebreaker. When did you become gay? Yeah, let's see. It would have been.
It's not a choice, Matt. You don't become gay.
Let's see. When did I come out? I usually use the day I told my parents as my coming out, which would have been October 21st, 2000. When did we graduate college? 2007? I think 2006. Which is weird because that's now 14 years ago. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing with gay people is we're coming out all the time. Like in my work, I have to sometimes decide, like if I'm working with a patient who's there because they had suicidal ideations or an attempt, and part of it was their orientation, or they're a kid who's under the custody of the state, and part of the reason that they are homeless is because they weren't accepted for their queerness. It's important for me to say that because, as a kid, I didn't have any adults in my life who were queer. And then as a provider, it's a way of connecting and being like, I'm a safe person. I understand this part. And then there are times, especially as a religious caregiver, that you don't say it because it's not important to them in the moment. But yeah, I'd say 2016, 14 years ago.
We talked about this a little bit in pre-show, which is interesting. When Matt and I both went to a Southern Baptist college. It was not very conservative, but more conservative than pretty much anywhere else that you would be going to school.
it was like it was theologically progressive, socially conservative, which is a really weird, backwards kind of thing.
Right. The religious studies, Christian studies students were liberals, and everybody else was conservative.
Yeah, literally, that's what it was. Is those of us who knew scripture were like, oh yeah, and then, but oddly, not all the professors, they would teach very. Yeah, it was weird.
It was, and I actually started there as a Christian studies student as well, and took me and Matt were in classes together for a while. But what I was alluding to is that at like people would say things about Matt being gay, possibly, and I would always be like, "You guys need to stop being mean to Matt." Like that was my response to it, because he like he's saying he came out to his parents later. That would have been probably our junior year.
Yeah. I mean, I was writing a queer thesis. What was it? An introduction to queer theory and its application to the Gospel of Matthew was my senior thesis, and I wasn't out.
Right. It was one of the. Well, you described it as something earlier, and I kind of wanted to talk about that. How did you describe?
Oh, yeah. The glass closet is a phrase that's used.
Okay.
It's when somebody is clearly living out their life as somebody who's queer, but has not officially said it. So think Anderson Cooper, like circa late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a really interesting time, and this is a time in my life too where I'm struggling. I came from a strict conservative Southern Baptist family where homosexuality was a sin, period. And we still had the love the sinner, hate the sin thing going on. So I was never outright rude or disrespectful towards gay people, but at the same time I was still struggling in my own concept of life, of like with the concept of homosexuality and what it was and whether or not. And I was right at that point where I was like, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's not bad at all, as a matter of fact.
Well, I do want to ask more about that glass closet metaphor. So, like, when you were living in the glass closet, right? It's sort of, is that a situation where, like, you realize everybody else has pretty much realized, but it's just not talked about?
Yeah. So there's an element of, I would say, like, emotional vulnerability that comes with being gay, that comes with outwardly saying it. So by giving conservative Christians your identity on a platter, it gives them they tend to decide that it means that they are entitled to tell you all about how it's sinful and convert you and all that. But if you leave it in this ambiguous state, you actually put them in a place of discomfort because they think you're gay, they know you're operating as somebody who is. I mean, I clearly was coming from a perspective where LGBTQ people should be accepted openly into worship spaces in the community of faith. And yet I wasn't saying I'm gay, so they couldn't make personal attacks against me, which tends to be what happens. And it keeps them in the place where they have to talk about it in a theological realm. And part of that, too, was I didn't want to start telling people until I told my parents, because my biggest fear was them finding out. And so it was a very much a place of tension. But what I'll say about everybody who I came out to in that time at school, for the most part, the experience I had at college is if I came out to somebody, they usually immediately responded by recognizing how deeply vulnerable that put me in, and usually sharing something about themselves that they were struggling with that they hadn't talked about. And in a Christian college, that might be premarital sex, that might be their own possible disbelief in the faith tradition that they were raised in, and it could be a number of other issues that we didn't talk about gayness in the church, but we also didn't talk about a lot of other things that regularly affected people. So I actually felt after I was coming out, I grew a lot closer to people because there was just a transparency. There was just like, look, we both know that we're kind of figuring out what does it mean that we're doing these things or that we're becoming these people. And it offered, I thought, a lot of space for grace, for openness, for honesty and integrity. And those are the things that I tend to strive for now that are important to me. So, yeah.
So awesome. Then, my question would be like, do you find that there's a similar sort of model working when you're playing video games, where it's like you talk and you chat with people, and then like let's say you're in Discord, you're chatting with people. Is there sort of like a I'm going to operate in that glass closet in my online life in some
So
cases?
I would say a lot of us who identify as gamer. See, I use the word gamers with a Y, like
Yeah.
GAYMERS.
Yep.
There are one of the great things about being queer and being a gamer is like when I move to a new city, I immediately look for a community of like gay nerds who I can play board games and video games with. So I'm already getting a doubly safe space. Like I'm getting a space that is just about gaming and then also meeting queer people who have a shared lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm on Discord, I'm usually on like Gold Fruit Gaming, which is like an LGBT, mostly New York based, but people live across the country who join us. But it's a LGBT safe space. There are a few straight guys who play with us, which is fun. They're the straight guys. But it's primarily like this is the group that I play with. We're all gay, and that's a shared identity. I think the place that it comes out the most, like, do you want to say something, is when like homophobic shit or homophobic stuff goes down on in chats or in if we're playing with people that aren't in our Discord in a group, and they say like, "This is so gay," or like, they use you guys know what comes up, the bullshit that comes out, and how different it feels when suddenly like half the guys there are totally like we lean into how gay we are, and we lean into those things and kind of reclaim that we're not in isolation. We're not hearing homophobic BS just by ourselves in our living rooms. We're getting to hear, we're with other people, and we know that this is a reality that we live in, and we're able to, as a group, kind of brush it off or respond, or if the ethical response is trolling this person, then troll that person during the game. And yeah, I think that's something that's really interesting about anybody who has a minority experience. What does it mean that you play video games in the safety of your home? It's the way you unwind after work. You're playing a game and somebody says something racist or somebody says something homophobic, and you're by yourself and you're supposed to be in your living room and relaxing, and it totally is just such a like, it's just a really heavy experience. And so I think part of finding communities in gaming is to find safe spaces even when we're supposed to be at our most safe.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to talk about. Like, if you have any specific experiences you'd be willing to share of, moments where I think it would be interesting to our viewers and listeners to kind of hear, like, go through those experiences. Have you ever had a moment where you've been trying to play and just relaxing, and then something happened and you're like, you know what, F this game, I'm going to go read a book or something?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had like, we all have our rage quit moments, but I think that it does get escalated when like there is somebody it's not just a rage quit, it's just so toxic, and you're just like, I don't need this right now. Like it's a huge turnoff. And I think a lot of that comes down to like how well does the game as a platform get monitored? How well do they make sure that people who are flaming like that are getting booted? And I don't know. I can't think of specifics in gaming. Most of those experiences feel like they're more triggering in real life. But yeah, it just sucks. And it's also like, it also sucks that how often it has to be the gay people who are like, this is bullshit language, or like, this isn't how we should be talking.
Right. And it makes me think of, as I'm the token privileged guy on the show.
I mean,
yeah. Like I do want to like break that down. Like, one, we all are dealing with some privilege. We're all
exactly.
middle-aged men, so we already have that privilege. You may have other privileges that some of us don't have. I'm a cis straight male, so I share a lot of privileges with you. 2 out of the 3 of you guys don't have a privilege that I don't have. Right? There's a lot of levels of privilege, and like, but like, going beyond that, I just wanted to ask you, when you are dealing with that sort of thing, like, and obviously, like, it can turn a fun evening into something toxic that you have to, like, walk away from. Like, what would you ask of people who are trying to be allies? How should they interact with that kind of experience?
I mean, I think that in the context of the games I play, I mean, it should be zero tolerance. You know, if somebody's throwing down the N word or the like F words, like they're there to troll. They're there to get attention. They're there to get a response. And so there's part of me that's like, it's hard as somebody who thinks learning and teaching is so helpful. Like that's not a learning moment for that person. It's really in most cases where there's somebody who's a bully, the most important thing isn't the person being picked on to stand up, and it isn't the person who's the bully to recognize what they're doing. It's that people who are in a bystanding position usually have the most power, and they need to use it. So if it means banning or blocking or muting people, if it means saying this guy, like what's being said is completely inappropriate, I'm just going to block them. And it's just not giving them platforms. You know, I think that's the most important thing is we don't need to be a speakerphone for that kind of language. And I know that people get all huffy about freedom of speech. Private platforms, video games, those are hosted, those are monitored, and there doesn't need to be a place for that in gaming. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
And to the point that it's so harmful that it actually harms our community. So for a really long time, it was really hard to create LGBT guilds or groups because all of those terms were considered hate language. So no, we don't allow groups that have the word gay in them. We don't allow groups that have the word lesbian because those are all like used to like pick on groups. And so even when I'm trying to like create a group for LGBT people, because those terms have been considered derogatory, we can't even like get together.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah. The other thing that, you know, something that came up to me, like when they added voice chat to one of the games I play, there was a big discussion about.
Was it Heroes of the Storm?
Yeah, it was totally Heroes of the Storm. I still play it. There's still people playing it.
Yeah.
But,
anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but there was a lot of conversation from people who were like, I don't use voice chat, and I won't, even if it makes for a better, more chance for victory or better play, because like I'm a woman, and I don't want people to know that when I play, and or I'm a trans person, and I don't want people to hear my voice as you know. And just recognizing that, like, people have their own stories, their own identities that are living out in their living room, and if they don't want to voice chat with you, then they don't have to.
Right.
And if they're silent the whole game, it might be because they know that talking is a risk of being called out. And so I think I just offer everybody the best of grace that they're trying to do their best in their own little space, in their own little world, especially now where, like, the world is crazy. Or the world is out of control.
It is crazy and out of control. I'll give you both.
Yeah.
And that's something when I was bringing up privilege that I wanted to just note here is that these are for those of us that might not either understand privilege or understand our privilege or biases or whatever. Like hearing these stories and realizing that I'm probably never going to log into a game and somebody say something so upsetting that I would want to leave because I am not a member of certain groups that that are targeted by this kind of language and trolling and stuff like that. Now, as me being who I am, I find those things very offensive, and so yeah, I'll stand up. But we also have to realize, especially if there are people out there that are trying to play, they're trying to find a community, and then this sort of stuff is happening, they are being discouraged from that. Yeah. So yeah, like or from finding these communities because it seems like they can't find one. So I just want to say to allies out there, you know, make sure that we're, just because it's not directly attacking us doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing these same things by, you know, whether it's blocking someone because they're, I remember that I was in the Overwatch Alpha, the Friends and Family Alpha, and one of the first things, this is the Friends and Family Alpha, like nobody had it. One of the first things that happened is I logged in and they were testing the voice quality, and somebody screamed the N-word in the voice chat. Was the first experience I had in the game. I literally turned it on, joined a lobby, and there was someone screaming the N-word, and I turned it right off. I was like, this is done. But yeah, like, I just wanted to bring that up. Like, it's not just because it might not necessarily directly affect you. If you care about other people, I would recommend that you do what you can to, make these communities as good as possible. And if that means blocking, especially reporting, use that report feature, because this is something that, like, Matt was saying, talking earlier about suicidal ideation and how a lot of times it has to do with your identity or whatever. This is something that we haven't talked about bullying much of the show yet, but we're going to have, I'm sure, an episode on that later. It's something we have to, literally people's lives are at stake when it comes to this kind of stuff. So make sure you're hitting that report button and getting people banned for doing this kind of stuff, because it's not just shitty, it's dangerous.
Yeah, and I think that it creates this like terrible experience for all of us. And also we play worse when people are mean to us. That's the thing that's weird to me, is how mean people are when they game. It's like, if you're on a team with somebody and your response is like, you're dragging us down, you're the worst, you're terrible, they're not going to play better as a response.
No, it affects your psyche.
Yeah, and we have research in medicine, for example, that shows that if like you're mean to your doctor and your nurse, like in ways that are not like keeping them accountable or advocating or there's an issue, but like you're just not kind to the people who are serving and trying to treat you, you actually cause them distress, and then they're not on top of things. They're not able to concentrate. And the same with gaming. Like I in games where people are toxic, you don't win. You don't win any better. You just lose, and everyone's miserable. But like games where I've lost and we've just been kind to each other and we've just been like, it's fine, we're having fun, this is what we're doing, I have a better time anyways. I'd rather lose a game with nice people than win a game with people who are terrible.
Right. Yeah.
I think it goes right back to what you were saying before, that the bystanders have the most power. If you make a environment where that's not tolerated, you're creating an additional safe space. You're creating a space that doesn't have that sort of toxicity, and it'll grow from there. I know a couple of places that are just so great for inclusivity. Girls Gone WoW is a podcast that I love. They are great with inclusivity. My own guild, Get Your Crit Together. I just literally, it's one of those things, it's one of those questions where you just never ask, right? I don't ask people what skin color they have. I don't ask people like who they're dating, because it doesn't matter in terms of like their DPS or like if they can do their role. And we don't engage in that sort of language. It wasn't until like people wanted to share things, like I shared a photo and people were like, oh, I didn't know you looked like that, and everybody knows what in the world they're talking about.
I didn't know you look like that.
You're skinnier than I thought.
I thought you'd have more hair. Yeah, okay. I have a group of friends I play with, Ben Nguyen and his brother and some of their friends, and I've played with them for like 3 years, and I added one of them on. I added my friend, his brother, on Facebook, and next time we played, he goes, I didn't know you weren't Asian. I was like, what? He just assumed because I was with a group, and I think it's because my name is usually gaming name is Hugh Matt, and it's just like flipping Matt and like Matthew. It's just flip. But for some reason they're all Asian, and he just assumed I was playing with the group, and it was nice. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, I'm not, but okay. But yeah, I think that finding those spaces. I think also I think there's something to be said about naming when a space is safe, even if nobody's identity is brought up. Like, it's sometimes people who are queer, bi, or any sort of that identity, they're in those places and they're not saying anything because they don't know if it's safe. So if you're not putting out there that this is a safe place, if you're not putting out there, then you might have queer people in your midst who are like, I'm not going to share this part about me because I don't know how it will be received. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with that, because we had a person who recently, well, not even recently, I guess, but it seems recently, but admitted that they were bisexual, and like I am very proud of the community that just accepted it and moved on because it was just another part of who they were that we found out, not any
Mhm.
bigger than anything else. But yeah, it could have gone south if we had allowed elements of people who were not tolerant of that, and then it would have been an issue that we'd have to deal with in a response instead of proactively. So I think
Yep.
you're right in that way, that you should be proactive, saying that this is a safe space, that that bigotry wouldn't be tolerated.
Yeah, and this is
Yeah.
something that's important. I was going to talk a little bit at the end of the show, and we can still do that, about listing some different places where people might be able to find it. But I also just added in the topical discussion channel on our Discord, and if any listeners are out there too, that you guys are aware of certain communities that are particularly that you would consider safe places for progressive inclusive gaming, whether it's groups like Matt was talking about that is LGBT centered, or if it's whatever it is, as if even if it's your own community and like, hey, I'm the GM and I don't deal with all this kind of stuff. So if you want an inclusive guild to join, if you're looking for one, here it is. This would be a cool place for you guys to just kind of talk about it. But since we brought it up, Matt, what I know you mentioned your gamer group too. What advice do you have for people that are looking for a place, if whether or not there are necessarily places? Not only, here are some ideas of gamer groups that you might be able to join, but where might they be able to look for other places that they might want to join as well? Do you have any ideas on that?
I mean, I did. Yeah, I mean, I've moved a couple times in the last few years, and so I tend to look for. I always use like Gamer, Gaymer,
Mm-hmm.
uh, groups. There's recently in the last couple, like last 10 years, there's actually conventions that are about gaming and being queer. FlameCon. If you live in larger cities, of course, it's always easier to find an intersection between your identity and the things that interest you.
Mm-hmm.
So like, uh, I mean, Facebook is always a good place. Groups that you can tell are being monitored. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I think we all kind of have become more accustomed to finding our communities, finding those social groups, and
Do you know
yeah,
of
I
any
mean,
like Discord channels or particular Facebook groups or anything like
yeah,
that
yeah.
you would
I mean, I
recommend?
would say there's NYC Gamers is one of that I'm part of. Gold Fruit Gaming, I would always promote, and the people who moderate that are incredible. Um, the memes are great, the community's good, and there's always people playing Dead by Daylight or other games that you can kind of jump into. Especially if like you really want to be playing a game with a group of people you know. So like I've been playing WoW by myself for a long time. Like maybe it's time for me to join a guild, or maybe it's time for me to try this game with other people. That's a really great start. And if you're lucky enough to live in a large enough city, we do in-person community events. We do in-person things. I'm also always aware that there are people who live in much smaller communities where you're lucky if you can find other people who are queer, much less other people who are queer who enjoy video games. So that's one of the things about online communities, Discord, that offers that is like it's a space that you can find even if the community around you isn't able to provide you that support.
Yeah, awesome. And along with that, feel free, anybody out there that hasn't yet. And I know this sounds like a really crappy push to get people to join our Discord, but I really want to make sure that everyone knows that if you don't have a community, even if you want help finding a community, join our Discord. We have need support rooms where you can ask any questions that you want or just share issues that you're having. Feel free to DM me. You'll be able to see me once you get into our Discord and be like, oh yeah, Sharku, I want to send him a DM if you have any questions. But I just want everyone to know out there, if you don't already, there are places for you to be able to be yourself, or at least even if you're not, even if you're like me and don't necessarily identify with these certain groups but are an ally, and get really triggered when that toxic stuff is happening. I just want to be in a safe place where people aren't going to be mean to my friends,
Yeah.
Um, definitely check some of this stuff out. And but yeah, cool. We have a little bit of time left. I wanted to kind of transition a little bit. Even though this is all really good stuff and good conversation, we can keep going. But I wanted to talk a little bit about LGBTQ identity in video games, and just ask you, Matt. First of all, kind of where I want to go with this is like, how progressive do you think the game industry is right now as far as identity with characters and things like that in video games, and what, if anything, could be done? What has been done that's been an improvement? What has been done that has set us back? I don't know. Just kind of, that's a very bunch of very broad topics.
Yeah,
but, but that's kind of the realm I want to go into.
It's good. I mean, I will say, like, recently I just finished Last of Us, which is already Last of Us Part 2. Which
are we doing spoilers? I just want to make sure if we say something.
Are we
about it.
Well, I won't spoil.
Okay.
But I will tell you that
spoiler free.
This is a game that has said basically, and I'm sure they've gotten pushback with it. As I played through the game, every opportunity they had to like reclaim that they were just going to make this the queerest game in the history of gaming, mm-hmm. and make a ton of money off of it, just to show up everybody who said, any naysayers. I love that. I thought it was wild. It was great to see a game that was like, we know you've been playing games that are so catered to straight men. We know you've been playing games that are tokenizing of these characters, and we're just going to make a very queer narrative. And it was really weird. It was weird playing a game for the first time, as I guess, like, I keep thinking about like the 10-year-old kid picking up Final Fantasy VII for the first time and playing as mm-hmm. Cloud and feeling this empowered, like, I am this strong character who's got this, like, these kind of romantic relationships with these women. I mean, confident and secure, and like to finally play, like, to play as Ellie, who's this like open lesbian who has this like amazing Jewish girlfriend throughout the game, mm-hmm. and then some other things that come up, and the queerness of it, the theme of family being something you build around you. I love that, and I wish more games tapped into it, because there are so many people, not just queer people, who are looking for family. They're looking for narratives about how do we build our own communities when we live far from our family, or our family aren't the kind of people we can build that with. Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're in a stage where we're trying to move as, storytellers. I think that the gaming industry is trying to move beyond like token characters. I know that Shadowlands is, like they've introduced in their latest novelization of World of Warcraft a queer relationship, and I'm sure there's been talks about that.
Shameless plug, if you want to hear some talks about that, go check out Merely a Setback, a podcast about lore and storytelling in World of Warcraft, where we interview Madeline Rue, the author of the book.
Oh, really? I really appreciate what she's done. Did you write the one for the last expansion too?
No, that was Christy Golden.
Shadows Rising was hers, and then the one from before was Christy Golden, which was Before the Storm.
Before the Storm.
Okay. Madeline's super awesome. She came on our show twice because she's just really cool. But anyway,
I love that. I think it's great. Like, you're stuck with the hard thing about World of Warcraft is you're stuck with a narrative that's been writing itself for what, 20 years? How long has World of Warcraft been around now?
Almost 30 years. Will be 30 years in November.
Well, Warcraft has been 30 years. World of Warcraft is like 16, 17.
Right, and 16, I start to see like World of Warcraft is where a lot more of that narrative got fleshed out, and like, so it would be really hard for them to be like, all right, we're gonna make Jaina a lesbian now, or we're gonna mm-hmm. like decide that, but I like that
J.K. Rowling treatment.
Gosh.
Sorry.
I think anytime you're looking at character customizations, how do you deal with that? I still think of like the binaries that still exist in gaming. Like, do you pick the woman character or the lady character? Mm-hmm. I thought that oddly enough, Animal Crossing does a really good job with that. If you've not played Animal Crossing, they don't call it the girl or the boy character. They go which kind of archetype do you want. They never gender you in the game. They let you wear all the clothes you want. So I think as we're looking at more games that allow for personal choice and more games that allow for like expression of autonomy, they're getting that. The developers are getting that people want to play more than just the white guy, and they also want to play as somebody different than they are sometimes. I know a friend of mine who loved playing Assassin's Creed as the female protagonist, and many people who play Mass Effect will vouch for the voice acting for Commander Shepard. They'll say the Commander Shepard is the female voice actor because that was so stellar. We're not there yet. I mean, it's probably akin, maybe even a little bit more behind than television, I would say.
Sure.
You have some studios that make bold moves and others that probably won't be making those biggest steps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. For me, there's a couple of things that hold video games back. One is that there is still this stigma in a lot of mainstream that video games skew towards a younger audience. And therefore, these topics are stuff that we shouldn't be introducing in that media, which I think is a complete red herring. The other thing is that there's still very much this patriarch sort of sense to it, where like a lesbian couple is more acceptable than a couple of two men, and it's just that entire male gaze that goes into it that is that's still ripe throughout the industry, where they are far more willing to have two women together than two men. So yeah, looking at the latest stuff in World of Warcraft, actually having a trans character who even in their life had been a woman all their life, and then in the afterlife, when they come into how they see themselves, that's when
becoming their true selves.
Be a male. And like I think that's actually more powerful than if they had transitioned in life and then continued it on, is showing that somebody can be like all their life not actually seeing themselves for who they are, even if that's like the cis sexuality that they had. And I do think that we have such a long way to go. It's going to be a fight. There's going to be a lot of swinging back and forth as companies are more concerned about what's marketable than what is true to the story.
And I will say, like, the rise of indie games is great for this. I would also say, like, it's so wild how often we admit that like trans women are a huge part of what game development and the history of gaming has been, and that female gamers actually make up most of gaming now. That there's so many changes that we don't recognize, that we're really stuck. I mean, I have a whole theory about why are we stuck in this like white cis male ideology for gaming, and I think because what oppression, what privilege does is that for many white straight men, they don't have a community because they don't have an identity. It's erased by becoming the norm culture. And so for a lot of those men, gaming becomes their community. Gaming becomes the people that get me. And so they become very protective of that space and start to project their identity as white straight men onto gaming as if that's going to protect their community, that safe place. And that's just not the case. There's so many great stories to tell about different groups.
And I think that you've got a real point. Like, I haven't really thought about it that way, because I see what's happening, and I don't really necessarily see why, but a lot of that makes sense, having to try to find this identity. And what happens is that I think a lot of times you look back at Gamergate and you look back at, incels, neckbeards screaming on the internet. And I think when people think about gamers, especially people that aren't involved in the community as much, and and we can even include game devs here, because there are definitely game devs that are guilty of not being involved enough in their community. They produce what they think people want and not what they don't necessarily produce what people actually want, because they're not there. But my point is, Those are the loudest groups right now, and I think they're the vocal minority, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so what I would say, what my thing is that we as progressives, or even if you don't want to identify with that term, but we as someone that believes in, as people that believe in equality and in having games tell all sorts of different stories, we need to be louder than the groups that are screaming about whatever they're screaming about, whether it's a lesbian main character, whether it's, we need to fire back and let devs know. Twitter is an amazing place where you can talk directly to celebrities and video game developers and whoever. Tweet at them. Post things on social media. Get your message out there. If something if you were like Matt, and I haven't played Last of Us 2 or Last of Us, but if you really enjoy that storyline, let people know about it. Let the devs know about it. Let the community know. Be louder than the people. If there's something that happens that you really hate, that you feel like is toxic, let people know about it.
Right. I also think
be just as loud as the incels.
That's a high. They're pretty loud.
Very, very loud.
They have a lot of time on their hands, and so I mean, don't give platform to people who are spouting things that aren't necessary. Mm-hmm. I also, as the socialist, queer progressive I am, what happens when we decided that the mark of a value of a game is how many sales it has? What happens when we decide that we can't tell these stories because it won't make the underlying buck won't be as well? And I think I like to believe we're getting past that. And I like to believe that there's some very passionate developers who are doing some really great things and telling stories in a different way. And that it's really easy to miss that because Nintendo hasn't released a gay Mario character or something. Right. Yeah, I think we can demand more. I think we can demand more stories. And also, queer people in relationships are not traumatizing their children. They're preparing them to understand that there's a diversity of stories out there. And yeah,
it's a society shift that we have to do as well. So,
and I think when you were talking about indie games, I think that's really where you are going to see people pushing the needle, where they are talking more about the artistry of the game and the story of the game than that they want to make, and then having to go up against a focus group that is in itself biased by how they want to go. So I think that for that creativity, indie games are about it. It's really great that we are seeing more of it penetrate into the AAA larger markets. Blizzard, of course, as we were talking about before, and is a company that is near and dear to us because we all love Heroes of the Storm here. I think
we're all fans.
Yeah. Right, so
hey, I was semi-pro, man.
Well,
I got
now
carried.
You're an adult with jobs.
I got carried into semi-pro, but I was there.
Yeah, but I do think that if you find a great story that speaks to you, or any kind of great game that speaks to you, promoting that, helping speak with your wallet, does help. As much as advocacy can help, sometimes there are people who don't want to put themselves out there in Twitter and how crazy social media can get. So as much as it's easy for me to jump on and be like, yeah, I'm gonna talk about this and that, and I don't care if you call me a social justice warrior, there are people who don't want to jump into that war zone, and there are other ways to join the conversation without doing that.
I openly welcome the title of social justice warrior. It's a compliment. Thank you.
And then I think that you have some really great developers and you have some really great competitive gamers out there who are creating spaces of visibility. I think Sonic Fox, just wiping the floor.
I wanted to ask, not to interrupt you, but since we're transitioning there, for all of us here in a second, just to kind of give some examples of developers or games that you think are doing really good, so that if anybody out there wants to try some stuff out. And once again, we're not being sponsored by anybody, but I think it would be a cool idea.
Golden Corral,
just like from our experience, what we've seen that either has like we talked about The Last of Us having a gay character with a really fleshed out story. That's whatever. So you were saying, while I were interrupting you, you were talking about Sonic what?
Sonic Fox is a competitive gamer who's, I think, a furry person of color, queer, who's done I mean, I just love when somebody like that wins a gaming tournament that's usually like identified as straight men. But as far as games that I think are doing it well, I mean, I'm interested to see how the WoW integration goes. I'm interested to see if they, they're doing a lot of cosmetic updates for character builds, like how are they creating inclusive? I always was upset that if I wanted to play certain races, like my body type has to look a different way. I also think body type and how that's being presented, which is a whole conversation. Last of Us Part 2, even Part 1 was, has some really interesting elements. I think there's some queerness in Hades that I'm enjoying. We talked about Overwatch, which is a really interesting game because so little of the narrative and the storyline is presented in game.
Into the game, right?
If you want the gay, if you want the gay content, download the DLC kind of option.
Right. Go read the comics, which are great, and the comics and the videos that's Overwatch for me.
The videos are great, yeah. And I mean, it's an approach. It's a safe approach. I don't know. I feel like there's better people at answering what are the queer gaming. I feel like I get enough queer content in my life too that I'm okay. Not every game I play is obviously not going to be LGBT dominated. But I was actually really impressed by the remake of Final Fantasy VII that they treaded into a very weird story that they had where Cloud's going to be wearing women's clothing, and I honestly thought it was a really interesting approach. Just like every aspect of what he did and the choices he made and the weird dance beforehand.
I was
really
so worried about that part, Matt, because Final Fantasy VII.
I honestly thought it was
Final Fantasy VII is my best game, my favorite game. If you're not aware, there's a part in the game where you have to, you're trying to save this girl who is taken by this basically a pimp. And he only lets women into his fortress. So you have to cross-dress in order to get in. And in the old game, it's kind of a little weird because they sort of make fun of your male main character for cross-dressing. And so when the remake was coming out in 2020, I'm sitting there like, what are they going to do with this to not be like, they obviously can't go with the same story. We're living in a very different time. But without spoiling anything, they do a good job.
A really good, and also the character who presents that as an option is clearly a very queer presented character.
Lots of new characters in the game too, and there's more representation. Yeah.
And I enjoyed that. I think that what we've seen for gay men in games, usually when it comes to minorities in games, it starts with them being presented as villains or in queer ways. That's why a lot of Disney characters have a queer following, is because one of the only ways to have a transgressive character is to present them as the villain.
Yeah.
And then you have the movement of you realize that you've done harm by presenting these characters really harmfully, so you instead turn to make them into these wise sages. Here's the queer man who's the wise sage who's going to get you. So I can see some of that in Final Fantasy, but I like that. It's affirming, it's fun. Everyone's really kind about it when Cloud is dressing that way, and
it's not made fun of.
No,
I can't remember. It might maybe pointed a little bit, but it's nowhere near as bad as the first game where he doesn't want to, and they always comment about it, and
yeah. So I see that, and the fact that became a conversation, that everybody wanted to watch how this would go, because we all recognize socially that things have changed since then, and that you need to have a much greater sense of awareness. There is and I think that next the stories that we're going to be looking at seeing are going to be definitely trans, queer, bisexual. Some of those stories that haven't exactly been told because they don't fit very firm binaries that we're still struggling with in gaming.
I wanted to add, Crescent Raven in the chat says that Elder Scrolls Online has a whole trans story arc. So that's something else that I wasn't aware of. I played the beta of that game and stopped. I've heard it's gotten a lot better, but that's another game that maybe people can
Yeah,
check
and
out.
I also think my idea of fantasy and sci-fi, and I know we often think of fantasy as setting place in a time in the past and sci-fi in the future, but both of them present a world of magic and wonder, and they're sort of utopian too. Like we can build a world that in the future, we can fly and do these things. I don't understand why being trans would be that big of a deal in a world where you have magic.
In some worlds it's not. If you look at like the Fable series, from like even the first game, there was a potion, one-time use would transform you from one gender to the other. Of course, it was binary because the game only had the two genders.
What happened?
Yeah, but it was just a poop, and then like it wasn't something that you reversed. It was just a one-time use potion that you could take, and that was it. And I think they had done it again in like later chapters, but that was one thing. Now in World of Warcraft, change your gender is not a paid service. It's just you go to the barbershop, you change your hair, you change your gender. It's a non-issue. Yeah.
I didn't know it wasn't paid. It used to be.
It used to be a paid service.
And they took it away, and then starting Tuesday, so literally 2 days from now, it's just part of the entire barbershop customization.
That's awesome. So like that's a way to like be like, look, we set a system up like this, and we're not going to punish you for. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, in games where you personally optimize your character, that's what we're looking at.
Absolutely. All right. To wrap us up, Manny, do you have any other suggestions in your mind?
Sure. I mean, like representation matters. I'm not sure about Discords that are specifically for that, but I know of many safe places. I'm gonna like tout off some World of Warcraft / Blizzard podcasts that also provide those spaces. So, You Think You Do, But You Don't is a show with Dunkirk, Hexman, and Farseer. Farseer is also known as Farnio. He is a furry. That is a safe space if you are dealing with that. If you are, we've lost Matt.
That's all right. Okay. We'll keep
going. If you are talking about homosexuality, if you're queer in any way, I was talking about Girls Gone WoW, right? They have a great community, which is a fantastic safe space. And then the last one that I want to talk about is that It's Always Sunny in Stormwind. This is done with Mistledine, Paw Creek, and Mr. Miles. Paw Creek is such a great streamer / podcaster, and they also have a very friendly community that you can join. Love those guys. So all of those shows are actually part of Warcraft Radio. And you know what? I do want to add one more because I missed this. But Warcraft Brew, that is done with Quissy and Pastaface. And again, right, another podcast with queer hosts, just having that representation. And like honestly, they're talking about World of Warcraft. Who you have a relationship really doesn't affect, again, your DPS in that, but just having that representation matters. And
I will say that queer people are better healers than straight people.
I was going to say that, but I didn't want to be a dick.
We're the only guilds that tend to have problems because we have too much support.
Too many healers.
Enough DPS.
Exactly.
So if you love playing DPS, you need to get to know more queer people.
It's 2 tanks, 2 tanks and 18 disc priests.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start sniping out of some of these guilds. Hey, you want to come heal?
Honestly, if you're looking for healers, I don't know what it is about. It's probably a longer conversation, but
we're actually over on healers in
a lot of us love playing support. So.
Who was it? I can't remember. They used to have him on Convert to Raid. That was a healer priest. healer for, I want to say
Darius was Shadow.
It wasn't Darius, and Darius healed too, but he was openly gay and he was a priest healer for, it was a world first guild. And I cannot remember the name. Anyway, sorry, that's what made me think about that too. But yeah, so if you need healers, make some gay friends.
Make some gay friends.
You know what? Even if you don't need some healers, make some gay friends.
Also make some gay friends.
Matt, we have other uses besides our utility as healers.
That's true.
I promise.
Last word, we're going to wrap up here. Anything else you want to share, talk about, advice you want to give?
I mean, don't feed the trolls. You know, in most cases, if somebody's being homophobic, you block. You don't argue with people. It just gives voice. So don't feed the trolls. Take care of yourself. If you're in a space that doesn't feel healthy or safe, you get out of it. Trans people, queer people, we're all around you. We're listening, even if you don't know that you can identify us. We're listening. So don't talk about people in ways that you wouldn't want them to hear. And play Last of Us. Come on, what's wrong with you, Brad?
I know. I need to. I
don't own a PlayStation. I got on that.
I mean,
I got furlough money right now, which is none. So.
Oh well, then that's
that's okay. I start working again at the end of October, so maybe I'll be able to do it.
You're worthy. You have dignity and value, no matter who you are. You're more than just whatever identity that you are kind of boxed into by society. You are the person that you're grace-filled and loved, and you deserve to be treated like that when you're doing something that is probably an activity for your mental health, which is what gaming is for a lot of us. So find places where that's accepted. Find stories that tell your story. And I think I retweeted this group. If there is,
where can we find you on Twitter?
Mine's at Matthew Dimick is my Twitter handle, the Rev D. I think that there are a lot of people out there struggling sometimes with sexual identity, gender. Happy if you reach out. I'm happy to help you get connected to resources or just tell you that you're loved and cared for and valued in this world. And hopefully you have community around you that can affirm that and places like this.
If for any reason you guys are trying to get in contact with Matt and you can't, just pop into our Discord or at us on Twitter, and we'll make sure that you get in contact with him. We just, in the announcement for this episode, I linked his Twitter handle, so you should be able to find him there for that. But
that's how I found him.
Yeah, that's going to do it. We're going to have to wrap it up. Want to thank everybody for being a part of the show today. Thank you so much, chat room, for hanging out. Thank you, Matt. We're definitely going to have you back. This is an ongoing conversation that we could have. And also, once again, we talked about a little bit at the beginning of the show, but he's an ordained minister, and I feel like religion in video games is going to be something that we're going to have to address at some point. That's going to be, me and Matt will get all nerdy and philosophical and go back.
I was going to invite him next week when you weren't here. I was going to be like, you can get here next week.
Don't do that. We've got to have.
If you want. I mean,
we used to have a group in college we called the Front Porch Club, where we'd all go drink beers and smoke pipes and talk about theology, and we can just resurrect that.
That was back when I was such a well-behaved individual.
I know, right?
None of those things. I mean...
But yeah, we'll have you back for sure. We'll be in contact.
And if you want to know a really wild crossover of those things, you remember the game Dante from
Dante's
the PlayStation? It was Dante's Inferno, but they had a game version of it for PlayStation. You meet a character who's in hell for being queer, and it was like, oh, interesting crossover here.
Cool.
But so maybe so much religion. There's so much to talk about. I would love to be back for that.
We'll do it. We're going to do it for sure. Real quick, we have a Patreon, guys. We could definitely use your help. Right now, this show is being funded by the creators, and we could definitely use your help to be able to help us out with that. Patreon.com/RestedXPcast. We don't expect you to give any money. This is always going to be a free podcast, but we would love if you have something to give, $1, $2. It's a monthly gift to be able to keep this podcast going. So please make sure you check that out and consider donating to that if you enjoy our content. We'd really, really appreciate it. Anybody to shout out this week, Manny? 5-star
So,
reviews, new patrons. I don't know if we...
Not at this time, but we are always looking for 5-star reviews. Helps us find new people, helps people find us and these topics that we are talking about. And of course, hey, keep the lights on. So please join the Patreon.
Yeah, absolutely. If you enjoyed the show, you have any questions, comments, suggestions for topics in the future, struggles that you're dealing with that you want us to cover, that you'd be willing to let us use as a topic for the show, please check out our Discord. Also, you can email us at restedxpcast@gmail.com. We'd love to share your emails with the rest of the community. Make sure that if you would like for us to mention you on the show, that you mention that in your email or your message, because we generally will keep everything anonymous unless you specifically ask for us to mention you on the show, which is absolutely fine and understandable. So that being said, you guys know where to find us. Manny, you got anything going on this week that you want to shout out real quick?
Okay, so I have been taking a break from streaming, but I'm going to be back at it now that we're officially going to be in the pre-patch on Tuesday. So look for me to be starting up on that. I am also having a couple of announcements that will be coming soon. You know what? I'm going to announce one right here. So for a sneak preview for everybody, I'm going to be doing a marathon stream for the launch of Shadowlands. I'm going to be joined with that Nimby, the Demon Hunter Extraordinaire from Get Your Crit Together. And we're going to go from 50 to 60 in one stream.
Oh my
so
God.
That will obviously be nailed down when I know when the expansion is actually showing up.
No one knows.
So sometime in February 2021 is my guess. So
yeah. And then I do have some guest host stuff that will be coming up. But if you want to know when that is happening and all of that, follow me over on Twitter. That's TrueVillainManny, true without the E. And of course, the Twitch is again TrueVillainManny, true without the E. You can follow both of those. Love them followers.
All right, that's going to do it. We got to get out of here. This show ran late, but it was worth it. Until next time, be good to one another.